This setup. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining another Balerion Space Ventures podcast. It's May 27, and today we're joined by Nick Destrycker of EDGX Space, founder and CEO. This is the company that has some of the world's fastest edge computing services on board satellites, so in space computers. Nick, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So to start things off, maybe give us a high-level overview of what you guys are actually building and the service it's providing, maybe for people who are unfamiliar with onboard computing, space computers, that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. So at EDGX, we're very much focused on enabling compute in space, right? So our bigger vision is to actually build out a sovereign compute layer in space. First and foremost, to process data in space coming from space. Okay, there is a lot of data being generated in orbit, and there is a problem on getting all that data down. So processing it already in space before sending it down really reduces the cost of downloading all that information and really getting your information much faster to your end customers. So that is the bigger vision that we have, is to build out this compute layer to process data from space in space. But then in the far future, it's really to process data in space from Earth. And then we're talking about the bigger concept of orbital data centers, which we think will be enabled in the far future. So that is really on the bigger vision that we have. Now, in order to achieve that bigger vision, we have to go in steps as a startup, right? So what are we doing today to achieve that vision? Today, we're building AI compute systems for satellites. So we basically sell these systems to satellite operators and manufacturers for them to process their data on board of their satellites. Now, apart from that, we are also kind of experimenting with another kind of revenue model, which is compute as a service. Now, compute as a service is really all about us selling compute slots for people that want to upload software on a satellite, process data, and just download the results. So that's really what it's all about. That's for customers being able to upload their software on a satellite, process that data, and only download the insights of that data. So those are the two revenue models that we basically go with.
Got it. And what's the technical challenges you have to consider when using space computing? Is it radiation, power, thermal constraints, latency? Maybe walk us through why this isn't super easy and quite hard, actually.
Yeah, well, basically you've touched upon all of them. So first one, you have to make sure that your hardware can survive in this harsh environment. So the three main ones are vibration, temperature, and radiation. So in terms of vibration, you can imagine something when you put a computer or a piece of hardware on a rocket and you shoot it to space, that it will endure a lot of vibration. So basically what one has to do is to continuously test your product on what we call a shaker. So it's a table that basically shakes your hardware product at all the frequencies that you will encounter during a rocket launch. And during those tests, you will either see whether you'll have bolts coming off, maybe some stuff that is vibrating so hard that you're hitting a resonance point. So those tests allow you to reiterate on your hardware and fix really the pain points of your hardware that is injured by those vibrations. So that's about vibration. Then you have temperature. So in space, it is very, very cold. You cannot just dissipate heat away. You have to radiate it away. So your hardware has to endure a lot of temperature cycles. So going from -60 to 120 degrees, even higher. So what you basically do with your hardware products is that you put them in what we call a TVAC, a thermal vacuum chamber. Put your product inside of a big chamber. Well, actually, it's not that big. You can buy small ones. And it's completely sucks out the air, such that it's vacuum inside. And then it's actually temperature cycling from minus 60 to 120 or higher to expose your hardware to these temperature variations, right? And then you'll also be able to see whether your hardware can endure this. So this is the second step is about temperature variations. The third one is radiation. Of course, out there in space, we're exposed to much more radiation than we are here on Earth. And what you typically do is that you for LEO, for example, low Earth orbit, but also for the higher orbits, you go to what we call radiation test facilities. You put your hardware under a beam that bombards your product with protons, electrons, and all kinds of special radiation kind of stuff to see how it reacts. So our compute products, for example, they need to have very high availability, right? Customers want to process data all the time, almost 100% of the time. So you need to make sure that you have the least amount of reboots in space. So meaning the least amount of single event upsets. And those proton beams really allow you to see how much of radiation dose your hardware can endure and how far you can go. And basically what errors pop up when your hardware is bombarded by protons. And then you can start to work around it. In terms of hardware, but also in terms of software to make sure that these don't happen, or when it happens, that it's not destructive, that at least your system is not destroyed and that you can just reboot it again. So those are basically from a space environment perspective, the three most important aspects that you have to take into account when designing space products.
Yeah, and walk me through how it compares a satellite with and without EDGX. Maybe a concrete use case and quantify, all the benefits that come from having you on board versus not. Like, what are you able to do that you wouldn't be able to do if you didn't have EDGX?
Yes. So today, most of our systems are being used for ISR and SIGINT use cases. So what does that mean? ISR stands for Intelligence, Surveillance, Reconnaissance, and SIGINT stands for Signal Intelligence. So in the defense world, satellite information is very much used to basically gather intel from the battlefield or from a location that you want to observe. Mostly Earth observation imagery is being used. So satellites taking pictures from our planet on the battlefield, but also from other regions that a certain country would like to observe. So in order to react on the stuff that they see very fast, they need to know immediately if a certain object is being moved, or a certain military vehicle is being moved, or something else has happened. So what you can do with our system on board of a satellite is basically to analyze the image immediately with a certain AI model, for example, to identify the objects of your interest. And when the AI model detects that object, you can immediately download the alert of, okay, there is a vehicle here, or there is an object here, which has moved. That amount of information is very small. So it's only like an idea of an object and saying where it's going or did it appear or not. Instead of just downloading the full image down to the ground and then processing that entire image, that can take from half an hour to hours even. And if you process that already on board, you can identify that object in minutes, and possibly and even seconds. So that's what I mean by we reduce the time between detection and action on the battlefield, right? So basically, the Department of Defense can have their information much faster to act. That's for the military part. Of course, there is also the commercial part or the non-military part. And there it is mostly used to reduce the cost of downloading. So if one wants to for example, detect whether there is a flood ongoing or there is a forest fire somewhere in the world, then again, you want to know that very fast and act upon this kind of disaster. So same principle, you upload an AI model on board of our computer on a satellite, and you start analyzing images. You either detect whether there is a flood or not, and you just send that information back. So those are the type of use cases where it's mostly being used for.
No, and the hardware that you're putting on these satellites to enable it to run these AI models, what does that look like? Is it an off-the-shelf like GPU or something else entirely?
Yes, so we deliberately choose to go for commercial off-the-shelf technology, and so our products are based on NVIDIA technology. So we take, for example, the NVIDIA Jetson Orin GPU or the NVIDIA Jetson 4 GPU, and we build all the hardware and software around this to make sure that it can, first of all, survive in space, and second of all, thrive in space. And in terms of, we actually go a step further in part of the software. We make sure that we can actually dynamically scale the power dissipation in orbit. So what does that mean? Depending on how much power you have available in orbit, depending on where you are in orbit, you might either have a lot of sunlight or you don't. What our customers want is to continuously process data, even without them having access to sunlight. So what we do is our software is able to dynamically scale the amount of power it is using to process that data. So that's also on the software layer. So yes, we are using commercial on the shelf and NVIDIA technology deliberately, yes.
And where's EDGX today? What are some milestones you've hit in the recent past as you've been growing? And as of the future, what are some things to look forward to?
Yeah. So we actually started the company in February 2023 with just me and my co-founder, which is CTO of the company. But we really started designing the product at the beginning of 2024 when we had our first government contract that actually funded the R&D. And we were able to grow the company from just 2 to 17 people today and designed our first system in orbit in less than 18 months. So actually about 2 months ago, when we're May 27, yes, so two months ago, we flew our product for the very first time on Transporter 16, SpaceX Falcon 9. And that was the real, biggest milestone that we were able to hit as a company. It was actually the second milestone. The first one is that we had that we signed our first customer, right? So we signed our first customer even before the hardware even flew. Now that's a big thing. So this customer was a big customer. They actually trusted us. We showed them how we're designing this product, how we are validating it, how we're testing it, and really, give them the confidence in our small company that we would be able to do what we're doing. So they took the risk, and it turned out great for them. So we were able to deliver a volume of these systems in less than 5 months from the start of production to delivery. And that was even before we flew the hardware. So we have sales ongoing, we have revenue ongoing. So that was actually the first milestone. And the second one was that we got flight heritage, so on board of Transporter 16. And we actually went with the full team there. So all 17 of us, we traveled to Vandenberg Space Force Base. But we were not actually on the base itself because we need military access and we didn't have that. But quite close by in Paris Great, which is a public viewing spot. We were there with the full team. It was a night launch, 4 o'clock in the morning. Satellite goes up. Rocket goes up. At some point, you hear satellite separation. And then I jumped into my co-founder's arms and we both cried like two big babies, because this is, for us, this was a big thing. Like 2 years ago, I said to our team, which was only 3 people, look, in 2026, we're going to launch for the first time. And when we're launching, we're going to watch it live, all of us. And then it happened. So that was very much the biggest milestone that we achieved so far. Now, what's in for the future? So we have flown our first system actually on board of 2 missions, an NVIDIA-based compute system to process data in space. We are already designing the next version, which is based on the NVIDIA Jetson 4. And that one is going to fly in Q1 next year on board of a customer mission. That is also one of the milestones that we are going for right now. And the other milestone is also going to happen next year, but more towards the end, where we're going to launch our first orbital data center nodes. So obviously we have now, our products are basically compute building blocks, right? We're commercializing them. We're selling them. We are achieving profitability with just these products and the compute as a service models. Now, the next step for us is to go bigger into our vision of building a compute layer. So next year, we're going to launch a cluster of our products together to form a big compute cluster in the kilowatt ranges and demonstrate really the concept of an orbital data center node. So those are 2 big ones for next year. And then the third one, which is actually at the end of this year, is that we have to achieve scale with the first product that we flew. Our backlog is growing in the hundreds of units to be able to deliver. So we need to achieve scale in production with the first generation of our product. So that is the third milestone that we have to achieve. And then that needs to be this year. The other 2 are for next year. So that's about the time span in the next 18 months, let's say.
And these going up, they're a payload on another satellite. Are these other satellites, are they customers of yours? Are they simply there just for, in-space transportation? What's it look like right now? And I guess where's more the pull coming from in terms of customer demand? Is it commercial or government right now?
Yeah. So our first 2 missions that we did on Transporter 16, one of them was a hosted payload mission. So where we procured ourselves a spot on a satellite to make sure that we, basically like in the form of an in-orbit demonstration. The other mission was actually one of our partners that needed compute in space. They were doing compute themselves, but they got some troubles on the way of themselves in designing this compute. So they approached us in, okay, we might need your compute in our satellite. And for us, it was the opportunity to actually de-risk one of the first missions. So that's how these two missions came into existence. Now, where the most of the demand is coming from is today is definitely from the defense side, definitely. For ISR purposes, for signal intelligence, and the demand is high, and that's also the reason why a lot of these customers want to go fast and want to work with a company that can deliver these things on time and quality and at scale. And that's really what we focus on as in terms of the hardware, to be able to deliver on time and quality and at scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And as things change so much, both in the AI world, the GPU compute world, and now in space data centers, what's that all look like in terms of tailwind for you and possible routes you can go down? I'm sure there's some strategic decision on deciding, what you put into mass production and, what those first few contracts go towards.
Yeah, sure. So, well, obviously the tailwind is great, right?
Yeah, it's a good tailwind, all of
them. That's very much that we're aligned on. So actually, the way on how we approach this, is that we want to go to the very big concept of orbital data centers, right? So this, we like to call it the compute layer, but in order to get there, we are using our current products to actually go to that compute layer in a sustainable way, right? So if you look at the US, there is a huge amount of capital flowing into the concept of orbital data centers. We're a European company. That doesn't happen here. Okay, the amount of capital that is in the US is not here. And those we need to try to take a balanced approach. And I like the approach of actually being profitable with currently our products and going towards this bigger goal. And it's not slowing us down whatsoever. So that's basically the approach that we are taking here. So generating revenue from selling these products, from selling this service. And as time progresses, we are putting more and more effort into the orbital data center nodes. And again, that will fuel even much more in terms of compute of the compute layer that we want to build. So that's really on the approach we want to take there.
Yeah. And space is slow by software standards, you could say. And so how do you manage those long sales and integration cycles when you have to still be learning on such a fast iterating product?
Yeah. So we are with 17 people on the team. Only 2 of them have space heritage. So we do not come from a space background whatsoever. The former company the company before EDGX that I did was called EDGX, where we were basically implementing AI in hardware, but for not for space. So think about smart cameras, smart food processing machines, and all that kind of stuff. So we do not come from the traditional thinking in space where one has to extensively test everything to the bone, and take 10 years before a system is ready. So we do not come from that background. So having a team that doesn't have a space background works. It really works. Yes, we had to learn everything from scratch, but that is all about mindset. So right from the beginning, my co-founder and I were really selecting the people that were up for the challenge, and yeah, that we're able to take on this gigantic learning curve of getting something to orbit. So it's a mix of and mostly it's all about the team expertise. Yeah.
Got it. And the capabilities you have where you're able to run this onboard compute with, say, Earth observation and then downlink it much faster. What's really going on there, and how do you train that? Is it just taking pictures and videos and on board it runs an AI system of saying, this is important, this is what we're going to send, and it just cuts out all the fat, and that's how it's so quick? Or is it something different entirely?
No, basically what you want to do is to adapt an approach which is very much similar, if not completely equal to how models are being used and trained here on Earth. So um, you have these larger Earth observation models, which are trained on huge amounts of data, um, and then you put them into orbit. They're going to identify certain classes of objects. And at some point you want to download as a company all these results and all the decisions the model has made to then retrain it or yeah, basically to retrain that model to become much more sophisticated in a certain class. And that's really the approach that we're taking, and we see that is taken in the entire industry. Yes.
Yeah. And in a future where this amount of satellites going into space is growing exponentially, and satellites are getting more advanced, but we still have these satellites, these legacy satellites that have been up there that aren't as advanced. Walk us through the difference between, or I guess what I'm asking is, what's going to happen to those old satellites when new satellites have these AI onboard capabilities, and the old satellites legacy, they're just remain. Are they still going to be useful? Is there a way EDGX can still provide value to them if they don't have the hardware on board?
Well, the problem is those older satellites, they were not designed to be interoperable, right? So they
Hmm.
don't have. So today, most of satellites going up, they either have an optical inter-satellite link to be able to connect to other satellites through laser communication, or a kind of an RF terminal to communicate with other satellites. So these other satellites don't have that. So there is little option to try to communicate with them. Because if we could communicate with them, then of course there would be a use case for us, where you have, think about in the future where you have a bigger orbital data center node that is able to connect to older satellites, draw in the raw data from their instruments, from those older satellites, and compute it and run AI models on it to identify objects or to do other kinds of stuff. But the problem is these older satellites don't have that interoperability. So eventually, when they are end of life, they will be hopefully deorbited, and new satellites come up every year. So we are changing as an industry to replenish our satellites, shorter life cycles, to continuously have the latest technology on board of your satellite. So that's really where the industry is going.
Got it. And just thinking about that, with what you're able to provide now on these new satellites, where's the huge opportunity? Is it in those in-space data centers? Is it in, you know, defense and more advanced systems like Golden Dome? Where do you fall into having I guess, the biggest tailwind on what you're able to provide in terms of these new markets?
Well, definitely, if you look at the landscape right now and the geopolitics that we're in, of course, and follow the money. I mean, the it's the amount of budget that go to Department of Defense is growing and growing and growing. So obviously, there is the opportunity. Um, on the long run, I do believe in the more commercial side of things. So where orbital data center, this is the energy game, right? So the AI infrastructure, the energy AI infrastructure problem that we have on Earth today, um, that I think will be in the long run the big win to go for. But there are multiple ways to go towards that, and today it's definitely defense. Yeah.
And you're based in Germany, correct? Or
No, we are based in Belgium.
Belgium? My
Belgium,
apologies.
yeah, Belgium. Again,
So,
it's capital of Europe.
as a European space space tech company, what's it look
Yeah.
like in terms of how that market is moving? Are we seeing governments starting to help out a lot more? And we're not seeing as many launches from Europe as we are the United States. When you compare the two, what are some of the big differences, and where is Europe doing a lot better, and maybe where is it doing worse?
Yeah. So so in Europe you have great technology. If you look at this, we have a lot of experienced engineers that are doing great things, and we are increasingly doing it faster and faster. So what you really see is that we're accelerating as a European industry. This is good. The problem that we still have today and is really on the launch side of things. So we are dependent on SpaceX for launching stuff, um, and that is one of the biggest problems that we have in Europe. So and obviously there is a lot of money also going there. There are a lot of efforts, resources going there from Europe to try to solve it. Um, but of course, if you're behind 15 years in designing a reusable launcher system, then you know that it's going to take still some time. So there are a couple of maiden flights from launcher companies scheduled in the coming years. So hopefully it's going to be solved quickly. But that is one of the main issues. Yeah.
And the customers you have today and plan to have in the future, are they mainly European, or are you venturing out and talking with maybe some US companies and governments as well?
Yeah. So this year was the first time that we traveled already a couple of times to the US, mainly to go to these trade show and conferences. That's still very important for our industry to like build up relationship with other space companies, and so also US companies. So our strategy right now is to we're getting a lot of demand from mainly European customers, but we also want to sell in the US on the commercial basis. And so obviously in the form that we are today, the form that EDGX is today, we don't have any US entity, at least not yet. So if we want to sell in the US, it is mostly has to be commercial, not institutional. So that's basically the strategy there. So, but today mostly European, and we are, let's say, investigating the US market.
And the US is having a real big push in space tech right now. A lot of it driven by the Golden Dome and Space Force. Do you see Europe ever having something like this in the near future?
Of course, you have the classic Iris Square constellation coming up in Europe. And what I believe that will happen is that it will grow. So Iris Square is mainly for resilient communication. You'll see ideas popping up, but also projects popping up where you're building on top of that resilient communication. So and then think about kind of the US is doing with SDA and the transport layer and those kind of concepts. We see that happening as well in Europe. So that's mainly that's the main one there.
Yeah. And growing a startup, a space tech startup, especially in Europe, seems much more challenging in the European environment with raising capital. What's it been like for you guys up into this date on having to grow and scale in a more conservative environment where money's not flowing around as much to early companies?
Yeah. Um, Well, actually, in the amount of money that we needed until now, which is about 10 million, we actually didn't have that much problems on getting that funding. So we did a seed round last year in August, 2.3 million, and that was. I'm not gonna say it was easy, but because it was the first time that we actually raised private money for the first time, but it was going well. And then of course we actually used that that private money for co-funding for a bigger R&D program. So and even that is going quite fast. So up until now, we didn't have that much problems in getting that type of that amount of money. The problem will probably come from when we go for much bigger type of funding. So, but then so the question is, will we go for even bigger rounds? In the future, I do see a lot of opportunities where customers are going to place big orders at our company, and that will allow us to grow with much less private capital than we initially thought we would. So that then works in our advantage, right? So we don't have to. I don't think in the next future, in the coming years, we have to go for very, 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 very big rounds, because we're going to be able to finance it ourselves. Obviously, we'll have to raise more, but it's not going to be in the order of huge amounts of capital. And for companies that do need it, there is, of course, a problem. So capital is not flowing, the huge rounds are not flowing that well here in comparison to the US.
Yeah. When you think about moving forward in these bigger rounds and having large orders, what are some of the other bottlenecks that you think might happen in terms of having to scale up? Does it have to do with software optimization and running a larger network? Does it have to do with hardware manufacturing and being able to rad harden all this compute power at scale? I'm wondering what this looks like in 5 years when you have 1,000 orders and you have to deliver those on time.
Yeah. It's definitely going to be the making sure you can really scale to that amount of volume with a very high yield. So our approach is to actually build that capability partly in-house up to a certain volume. But when it surpasses that volume, then to really work with external parties that actually scale up hardware products in other industries. Think about automotive, for example, and to really use that expertise to scale up the product quickly in the amount of volumes. So that's basically the biggest fear let's say I have, or let's say what keeps me up at night.
And when you talk to investors who are maybe on the fence about EDGX, what's something that they usually get wrong and you want people to really understand because it's so important that maybe they don't know?
Um, well, today, what is maybe not yet so clear. So we basically suck at marketing. Um, so that's because all of us have an engineering background, and but we are very sales minded. So we have so that's good. But we suck at marketing. So basically, on what we should be doing is to get more out there and more pronounce the vision that we have. And until recently, we didn't do that. We were so much focused on getting the systems to orbit and to really be focused on that. But of course, now there is also a time where I believe we have a role to play as a company to push for the bigger concept of orbital data centers in Europe. And so that's the stuff that we like. But we are working on that. So in terms of marketing, and then usually, so in the past, investors then came to us and they said, "Oh yeah, well you're selling subsystems," and I'm like, "Yes, that's true, but we want to go for this bigger compute layer, build it out. We are experimenting with compute as a service, and so usually that's something I have to fix." And it's not very visual from the outside. So
Yeah. Well, if there's anyone listening to our recording and you wanted them to walk away with one big takeaway from our discussion and why this is so important, what would you want that to be?
well, basically, well, if you look in the past, um, there when the internet was coming online, a lot of people didn't believe in it. Um, and look at it now. Now we are a civilization that is not able to function without it. And I believe right now we are at that same point with computer space. So yeah, that's where I want to leave it.
No, that's a big one. Well, Nick, this has been a great conversation. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Excited to see what you guys do in the future. Have a good one and take care.
Take care, Aidan. All right.